Hello, Jeff Manchester, Manchester Music. In this video, it's going to be part 2 of the How to Mix for Commercials video. If you haven't seen the first one, please go check it out. I'll leave a little card there so you can click on the link. In the first pass, we covered the arrangement, the kind of rules and standards I think you need to adhere to when you're composing for a compressed time format, like a commercial, 30 seconds long, and kind of tips to help make it stand out. So please go watch that video if you haven't seen it. What we didn't cover in that video is what we're going to cover in this one, which is mixing, the effects used, the automation, reverb, delay, everything that was used to kind of create the sound of this track. And I think the processing played a large role in how it sounds and what you're kind of hearing. So for a bit of a refresher, we'll play it from the beginning, and after it plays, we'll jump into track by track, what went into the effects and how we kind of made everything happen with this track, which is for a series called Are You Listening with Isotope on compression and stuff you need to know for mastering and so on and so forth. Have a listen. Great. So let's jump in there. I just opened up the automation lane so you can see what's going on. I'll put my do not disturb on so nothing disturbs our experience together. Let's start with Piano Strike. I don't want to go too deep into the stuff that I have on the Unicorda patch beyond the fact that it is Unicorda and I'm using, I guess, the deep patch that came with this sample library. I'd rather focus on, what's going on a kind of EQ level. So first of all, you'll notice that it sounds pretty compressed. Let me play it for you. So it's kind of what I wanted. I wanted it to be very squash and in your face to kind of wake you up. We're doing a little bit of EQ here with Neutron. You don't have to use Neutron. You can use whatever EQ you want. I happen to know this EQ pretty well, so I prefer using it. A little bit of a boost here, shelf, to the tune of 312 hertz, and then we cut a little bit out of the upper mids here at 1000K, around 1000K. We could do some before and afters here. I'm going to actually bypass Ozone 8 as well. I think I'm using a maximizer just to bring the level up. So here it is without that little EQ. So without the EQ, it sounds a little kind of, it just doesn't have a lot of energy behind it. And once we bring up the lows, we get a kind of girthier sound on the piano. So here it is with that EQ move. So we can really hear the hammer, that kind of felt kind of hitting, hitting the string. I'm not really sure how the mechanics works there, but you can hear that kind of oomph. So once more before. And after. And this is, again, just to really reinforce the fact that something is starting. We are starting a piece of music. Wake up, here we go. And in the next insert here, I have Ozone 8. Forgive the sirens behind me opening the door because it's pretty hot out today. And we're just using the maximizer a little bit to help bring up the level and frame everything. This isn't doing too much, but it's one of those things where if I get rid of it, you'll kind of miss it. So without it, and with it. So again, just very light. I think it's at its default setting here in IRC1 mode, just to kind of beef things up and frame this piano strike. So not too much going on here. The other thing that you'll notice is that I have a bus. So I'm splitting off part of the signal and sending it to something else that's hanging out on bus 1, and then it sends, that wet signal back in parallel. And what's happening here? We have space D, which is one of the reverbs that we have from Logic, and it sounds like this. If I turn it off, we'll just turn the bus off so you can't hear the reverb. Turn it back on. Where we're really getting a lot of sound is actually from Nimbus, which is from Exponential Audio, a company that I have grown to love and know a lot about, just as a function of them us acquiring them at Isotope, so I've had to learn these reverbs, and they're pretty incredible. So I'm actually going to turn the bus off so you can hear what it sounds like. The most of the sounds coming from Nimbus. And here's with. So not a huge difference, but I've actually got Nimbus more kind of doing a bit more lifting on the other tracks, which we'll check out. But I'm running every single thing that needs reverb through that bus and onto Nimbus and then back onto the track and then out the master. And that's just how I like to do it. You can have inserts on your tracks. You can kind of put everything at an insert level to save on CPU and just sanity. I have everything running out, auxes and buses and coming back onto the track and then out the output. So that's just how I prefer to do it. Do it however you want. Also, no fancy panning. I think we're almost at 0 dBFS here. Maybe we're not. But not too much going on with the piano strike. Where it gets kind of interesting is this piano melody. And we can see here, if you kind of, let's see if I can zoom in. You can see that we have different kind of velocities being mapped out here for the piano, and they go from low to high. And that's just me using the mod wheel to bring up the dynamics of this track. And that links to, if I go into contact here, I believe that just links to, it's either the dynamic parameter here or one of the parameters that just brings up the overall body of the MIDI as we go. So have a listen to that. So that it's these lines going up. That's me using the mod wheel just to bring up the overall level. But then I have some panning automation, or not panning automation, some volume automation here, and that's because when we hit this, this 9th bar here, we have other instruments that come in, and I kind of want those to I want those to have more of the spotlight than the piano track. So what you hear when I do this is the following. So have a listen from the beginning of the track. And notice how the piano goes down to make way for the other instruments here that come in at the 9th bar. So we still hear the piano, but it's not as pronounced as the cello and the strings and the violin track, and that's on purpose. If we have everything up, pressed against the glass, it's going to turn into a big mushy mess, and that's not going to be fun to listen to. So automate your dynamics and also automate the overall output level. Maybe it's a trim in this case, using your little pencil tool or whatever you have in your digital audio workstation to affect that. I think that's pretty much the only automation that we had going on. I had some particles mix stuff going on, and then I just decided to remove it because it just made things too complicated. By the way, this is from, people love it when I say this, Noir from Native Instruments / Galaxy Instruments. That's where that piano's coming from. And it's panned a little bit to the right. And we're using the classic Logic panning. I had a user comment, was like, why aren't you using the old style or the new style kind of true stereo field panning stuff in Logic? And part of the reason is I know this panning really well and it works for me. What this means is if we pan everything all the way to the right, it's just going to kind of turn down the output of anything on the left and kind of focus all of the output energy on the right side of the stereo field. It's not real panning. It's just kind of what Logic has been doing forever. And because of that, I've just kind of gotten used to it. But if you want to turn it to like true panning, then you would go for a stereo pan like that. And now you can kind of move things kind of true to stereo here. But I prefer to use the balance for now. It's just kind of, I've grown to like it and use it, and kind of like it says, it's not actually panning anything, it's just moving the balance from the left or the right. So it turns everything down on the left if you move it all the way to the right, and same thing on the left. If you move it all the way to the left, there's no output going on the right side. Not true panning, but whatever works, whatever gets you there, just use that. And for me, I'm just used to it in Logic. If I was in Pro Tools, I'd do it differently, but I'm not. I'm in Logic, and that's just how I have things set up. So Again, I guess the one big mixing note here is that the piano is going to go down when everything else comes in. The piano does take center stage, however, at the beginning, right? Like right here with this melody. Let's focus on the next little piece. Did we cover the piano EQ? Not sure if we did. I have Neutron up here too. No surprise, I work for Isotope, so I know these plugins well. That's why I use them. But you can use whatever you want. So we have a little bit of a dip here. This is just getting rid of some of the kind of woodiness of 300 hertz or so, low end. And then a little spike here. Default compression, not too much going on here. In fact, it's probably not doing very much at all. I can just turn it off, but the exciter, we do have some exciter happening here. We're going full band here. I could go multi-band, turn these guys on, but I didn't. I just kind of left this to the kind of full frequency, and we're turning up the blend knob on the warm algorithm here for the exciter. This is just warming everything up, and we have also a transient shaper, and I'm just kind of adding some spikiness to the high end past 6K. I'll turn Neutron off so you can hear what it sounds like without Neutron. So here's without, and maybe we'll turn it on halfway through and toggle back and forth. If I turn zero latency mode on, we're not going to hear those pops. Let's do one more. So I think the real lifting going on here with Neutron is just this EQ move. Again, it kind of sounds woody and boxy when we have this this node unbypassed. In other words, when we have energy kind of at its default here at 242 hertz. But when I knock that out and boost stuff here in the kind of upper mid / high end, it just sounds a lot more clean. It's a subtle difference, but that's what mixing is. It's doing subtle moves on each track, which will eventually lead to like a big kind of complete sound at the end. But little moves on each track and little changes go a long way in shaping the overall tone of the track. So, not much crazy stuff going on there. Panned a little bit to the right. As I said before, let's keep moving to the frozen highs, which I think are coming from Spitfire. So this is from one of their new little libraries. And we're using a mixed mic position. So this is pretty full frequency and pretty kind of in your face. A little bit of dynamics work. You can see here that we're kind of playing with the dynamics a little bit, and that's just coming from the mod wheel. Let's see if we can see that actual dynamics processing here in this instrument. So just take a look at this little knob there. So we back off a little bit. And then we come back up. So with strings, you have to be careful because some strings are so full frequency. These guys aren't. They kind of occupy that kind of high end territory. So I'm not too worried about EQing these guys. They are kind of stuck in their own category frequency wise. If they were a little bit kind of lower or mid heavy, I might have to EQ. But because just by playing my fingers, playing the notes, they were so kind of high end heavy already, I'm like, that's where they're going to that's the space they're going to occupy. I'm not too worried about, lowering things or whatever, or having to do any work. They're kind of in their own space, and they're above the piano melody, and the piano strike is already dissipated and decayed, so I don't have to worry about it. So they're kind of in their zone, and that's why you're not seeing any EQ here or anything. Not even sending them to the reverb. Maybe I should have, but they just kind of worked on their own. And for that reason, I've just left them alone mixing wise. And that's the other thing about mixing. I'm not trying to like think of stuff here as I go, but it just dawns on me that sometimes mixing or mastering is all about knowing when not to do something, when not to affect something, when it sounds good on its own. Your work is kind of done when anything you do to the track is not making it sound any better. You know what I mean? So don't just add EQ and compression and distortion and reverb and whatever you want just because you think you have to do it. If adding stuff to it dilutes it or diminishes its kind of effect and potency, then just leave it alone. Don't touch it, which is what I did for that one. So for the sparkling Decay piano, I don't think we have any other automation there either. It's panned up the middle too, but it is getting a pretty heavy treatment of two things here. First of all, let's just go into Neutron to see what's happening. So I did the same thing, right? I got rid of 242 hertz to the tune of 5 dBs down, and the same thing that we did here on the Frozen Highs. So a little boost here at 4K, and it wouldn't surprise me if I had very similar, exciter and transient shaper sounds going on that piano. Have a listen to that. I'm going to bypass Neutron and see if you can hear the difference. Oh, let me get a loop so it's a little bit easier for me to do these before and afters. So here's before, and here's after. So definitely more sparkly and fun and shimmery, which is what I wanted. Sparkling Decay piano after all. And we have this bus going to our faithful Space D and Nimbus. And so we're adding kind of a healthy heap of reverb. So if I bypass it, I'll bypass the other one too. I'll show you what's on there in a minute. So that's pretty dry. Let's turn them both on. By the way, I should mention what I have going on Nimbus here. Their halls are incredible, and we're just using a medium hall here. So medium hall, and I believe this is like one of the defaults, neutral hall as you go in. For those of you who don't know, Exponential Audio's verbs have thousands of presets, and they're pretty easy to navigate. You can go by keyword, or you can type in like a Google search. So if I wanted like, I don't know, dark, and I wanted like a plate, there, just hit enter, and now I get all my dark plates right here. But in this case, we're going to go back to medium hall, neutral hall. Just sounds lovely. The other thing we're sending, and this is to bus too, is we're sending some signal to Echo Boy. I have a dark tape groove 8s preset here. The mix slider's down pretty dry. It just adds a little bit of rhythm, and it almost sounds like someone's like playing it, kind of left and right in the speakers. So this is just a delay. They call it an echo processor, but it's a delay processor. And if you don't know Sound Toys, they're incredible, so you should know who they are. Let's just bypass this. And now when I bring it in, so this just helps give it movement and stuff. I wanted it to sound almost like someone was dropping their keys like in a sewer. It just kind of like tinkers and they're dropping change on the ground. It just kind of like delays and repeats. And I think it sounds kind of cool in the beginning of this track. And part of this is helped by the fact that we're using already a pretty heavy delayed and reverbed little particle sound from Noir. Sounds pretty cool. So let's jump over. No panning or anything going on for that track. Let's jump over to the Nox, and this is part of the percussion that I have for this track. It's pretty intense. So that's pretty slammed. That's also being sent. You can see here to Space D and Nimbus. Nimbus doing most of the heavy lifting again, going to the medium hall, neutral hall preset. But if you check with Neutron 2 here, I have a couple of things that I've done on this EQ. So let me bypass the EQ so you can hear the difference that it makes here. I'm boosting a little bit in the low mids and in the highs, and I'm cutting a little bit in the lows. And this just helps to add like some articulation here. I'm going to bypass the sub bass too. So have a listen to Neutron before. I'll set up a little loop. So that's okay. It's not that interesting, but watch when we add the EQ in. Much more mid-rangey, much more upfront. One more time. Let's do a zero latency bypass here. After. It just helps to kind of make it a bit more intense. And with the sub bass, which is I think a Logic, this just helps to add some sub information, some subsonic information, which is always helpful for these kind of moments in a track. We'll bypass it and bring it in. Here it is before. Here it is after. So free little, obviously free, it's factory, little, preset, but let's hear it in the mix what these two guys do here. I'm going to bypass both of them. So here's no, we'll go from the beginning so we catch all the MIDI. Here's no processing on that knock. Right, this is kind of boring. Let's add it in. Much more thunderous, much more alive, and also we're sending bus 1 here, so we're sending some of the signal out to our Nimbus and space D. And no volume automation there as far as I know. We just boosted things 2.5 away from 0 dB, which is where we started by default on the output there. Let's go to the violin, where I think we have it. Yeah, we're panned a little bit left. We're outputting a little bit left. And looks like I didn't do too much in the way of automation on the volume level, just by bringing it up a little bit. I think that got us to where we needed to go. So let me open up the EQ for that section. Here we have a pretty deep cut. So we're using a shelf and also the first note here to really scoop anything out of the low end, getting into upper mid territory, and a bit of a boost with the shelf at 2.7K. And we also have a little bit of distortion. Every now and then it's okay, I think. Well, it's okay. Do whatever you want, but it's nice to have distortion, because distortion can... I don't want a distorted guitar sound on my violin, but what distortion does help do is push a track, an instrument, a little bit forward. And so I'm using, I don't know what this is. It's just happened to come with Logic, and it just sounded pretty good. So it's a kick edge. So, if it's a preset is designed for a different instrument, just try it on, whatever you're working on, and don't forget about what it says, kick edge, and just see if it sounds good, which I think it does. So let's just loop this here, and I'm going to turn these guys off. I'll turn the reverb off as well, just so you can hear everything in context. I think that sounds really good. Don't want that. Let me unsolo this. Let me turn all the processing off, the reverb and the distortion and everything, so you can hear, I'll bring it in kind of halfway through so you can hear the effect that these plugins have on this violin track. Sounds pretty cool. Let's jump over to the cello, where we have a lot of processing here. So getting rid of some honkiness, I guess, with this EQ in Neutron is the first thing that I did. We're panning it a little bit to the right, which is kind of against the rules for cello, because cellos should be kind of low endy and right there, but to me it sounded good. A little bit to the right, like 1 o'clock. We also have a transient shaper, because those are always fun. And this is just to, I think, to me, what this does is this brings out the articulation of the instrument a little more. You don't have to use neutrons. You can use whichever one. But what a transient shaper will do it allows you to basically change the perceived loudness of the attack portion of the envelope and the sustain portion of the envelope. So the attack is like, when you hit, the drum head, and the sustain is the kind of ring that comes from that. So transient shapers allow you to go in and kind of meticulously boost, cut, not cut. Well, you can cut if you want, but they allow you to kind of manipulate those two aspects of a transient, which is kind of cool. And this cello, while it can play in a very sustained legato way, is very percussive, and so transient shapers work really well on percussive instruments. So this happened to kind of fit really well with what I wanted. And then we have some overdrive here, coming right out of Logic. Just again, distortion just helps to warm things up, or help them stand out in a mix. So let's do a little bit of before and after here. We'll just solo it. And we're also sending it to the reverb, because why not? So here it is with nothing on there. So you can hear that almost like there's two things that happen when I use this processing. One of them is it dulls out the cello a lot, which is fine by me. And the other thing is it kind of helps it settle in with the upper mid instruments and low end instruments a little bit better. When I have all this stuff bypassed, the cello sounds kind of cool, but once it's in the mix, it kind of disappears a little bit and almost sounds like it's just kind of, I don't know, kind of crispy, or a little bit like a violin. So that processing, especially on the transient shaper right here, really helps to kind of increase the level of, well, everything really. It's just bringing up the attack after we've gotten rid of kind of some woodenness here at 200 hertz. It's hard to explain. It's better. I'm happy I can show this with audio, because it just sounds more fun, kind of full bodied and less kind of sharp and spiky, which is what the piano and the violin are kind of taking care of. And the reverb just helps it kind of settle into the mix here. Let's do one more before and after in the mix. One more soloed. That's it. So let's go over to, I think this is like a double bass. Yeah, I had some fun effects down here. Oh, nope. Cancel that thought. This, I think we have a little bit of volume automation here. No, we don't. We don't even. There's nothing happening here. It sounds like this. Where are we here? We are in orchestral tools. So that on its own is pretty quiet, but once I couple it with a sub, it kind of takes off. I don't know. They sound really good together. Now, again, I mentioned in the previous video that you can hear you can hear us going between notes. You can hear those transitions, especially in the sub. You can hear the sample kind of restarting itself and transitioning, I guess, between intervals or whatever. But when it's buried in the mix, you don't really hear it. And that's one of the reasons why I have, if I pull up the mix page here, these guys are really quiet, because when I double them up, they're going to go up kind of together. And, we have a lot of other, like I'm not low passing a lot of stuff, or high passing rather. So I'm letting a lot of low energy information happen in the pianos and the highs and everything. And so for that reason, I don't need these guys to be too loud, because there's some low end kind of lifting happening from other instruments. Normally I like to do a lot of high passing, but in this one, I just didn't really bother doing it. But all this to say, if you're going to need something low endy, right? You're going to need something low end oriented for a mix like this. If you're not high passing everything else, the low end stuff doesn't have to be that loud, because you're getting low end information from all the other instruments. And these guys are kind of sharing harmonic territory. So I don't want them to be too loud, because they're going to kind of double up naturally when they're kind of at the same level and fill out the space really well. Just use your ears to decide how loud things should be, and getting an overall balance. But to me, they're panned right up the middle, and they're pretty quiet. But when they're in the mix, if you have a good system, you can really hear the low end. That would be something that you would kind of use in an LFE, low frequency effects channel. This sub here, and maybe this hellishly low violin or double bass, not really sure what it is. I could check, but I want to keep moving. Have a listen to it in the mix. Let me turn these guys off just so you can hear the difference. So here's no kind of super subsonic or low end information. And here they are in the mix. So for me, when I'm composing like this, using like a purely orchestral, with the exception of this sub, which is from Serum, a kind of arrangement, I don't want a whole bunch of low end in my track. I don't do hybrid scoring. I don't go for the big synth kind of heavy stuff. So for me, I'll let the cello take care of the low end, a little bit of low coming from this double bass or whatever, a little bit of sub, and then we're going to have some low end information coming from other non-low end stuff that just has some low end information there by virtue of being maybe a full frequency instrument like a piano or a cello or something like that. We're going to get some low end in there. So don't overdo it, because what happens a lot is people will kind of overdo it on the low end, and then that, low end information, if you're using a compressor, that'll trigger the compressor to kind of pump and move up and down, and then you get pumping, because low end stuff is kind of louder than a lot of other stuff, and so it triggers the compressor. It drowns everything out. It forces the compressor at a stereo out mix bus stage to work a little harder than it needs to. And we can talk about ways to kind of mitigate that using basically a sidechain input filter, so that it's not reacting to the low end. But basically, don't overdo it on the low end, guys. Everyone likes it to be nice and kind of thick and all that stuff, but it's really about controlling low end through a mix balance, like with these faders here, that will go a long way in ensuring that you have a nice, well-defined low end instead of a huge thumpy low end, which forces the compressor to overreact, and you don't want that. So let's keep moving here. Next up, I have a lot of automation on this track. I have some dynamics processing, and I have some volume automation going up on these sustained strings. And these are from Orchestral Tools. Let's have a listen to them soloed. Nothing happening here. And they kind of crescendo at the very end there. And so that's kind of, I've talked about this a lot on the channel, but just automating stuff so that it kind of breathes life into it. So we have automation here on the sustains. We have overall volume automation happening on the actual fader going up and down. And we also have some dynamics automation via the mod wheel. let's jump over to the inserts here. So we have, first of all, a spreader, which just does some fun, like, panning stuff. It just helps to kind of, I saw this in, for Logic users, there's a Beck session that you get free. It's like a track from like 2000, I don't know, 16 or something called Colors, or 17 called Colors. And I found on that session this little spreader thing, and it just sounds really cool, especially on strings. Let's mute these guys here. I'm going to undo the automation tab so we can get a bit cleaner. So the spreader certainly helps to fill out the space. I'm going to just bypass that independent of Neutron 2. So it just, again, helps to fill out. It almost like we get more mid-range, and these are kind of mid-strings, and it just helps to kind of, I don't know, open it up and breathe. And then we have an EQ here, Neutron 2, scooping out some of the lows, some of the kind of lows there, a little bit of a cut there. Decided to take it up for some, I don't know, sparkle at 1K, and then a little bit more sparkle at around 3K. And let's do a little before and after on that. Do it in the mix. Cool. So it just kind of helps them breathe a little bit. And they're not going to reverb. Maybe I should have put them onto reverb, but they just didn't need to, in my view. Next up, we have some Flutter Strings. These, I believe, come from, surprise, surprise, yeah, Orchestral Swarm. Love this library. And they sound like this. We'll go back to the beginning. Sounds like a bunch of geese honking by. We'll turn the reverb off, and I'm also going to turn Neutron 2 off. What did I do? Yeah, a little bit of a cut there. Shelf boost at 3K and up and onward, and that sounds like this when I turn the reverb and the EQ off. Let's add a little bit of that back in. So it's kind of hard to, let's go over here actually where we have more stuff happening. So that sounds really cool to me. It's not doing much but lifting up those strings a little bit and helping them kind of compete with everything else that's going on in the track. And this little low boost, or low cut rather, just helps to clean out some mud and focus the listener on what's happening, you know, from about 2K and above, which is where I think I wanted to accentuate these strings. Next up, sustained mid-high strings. What's going on here? Pretty much nothing but reverb. So that's without reverb. Here it is in. So these guys don't really need a lot of reverb. If I go over here, I think there's, yeah, these are recorded in the, this is a Metropolis thing. So this is on the Teldex, I think it's Teldex stage in Berlin. A lot of orchestral tools and stuff is recorded there nice and wet. So it already has a lot of reverb. So I'm kind of adding reverb on reverb, but whatever. It's just something I like to do. Let's unsolo that, go to Punch Orchestra. Nothing happening here, so we probably don't have to spend too much time on this because it's just straight out of the, the preset coming from Kontakt. Sounds like this. Nice and punchy and spiky. The horns, do we have anything going on with the horns? I think we do. No, we don't. Not a lot of mixing going on here, Jeff. A little bit of reverb. Here's before the reverb. Here's after. Some overdrive, again, some distortion. I like this warm drive preset. Before. And here's after. Just helps to fill it out a little bit. And this is panned a little bit to the left. And then we have some low strings at the very end here, and this is just helping things transition as we go from one section of the arrangement to another. That's it. No reverb, no nothing, just like, that's all I need right there in the patch. And finally, we have this rise and hit. And it is just so kind of compressed and full of full of a lot of stuff that I don't really need to do anything to it here. Have a listen. Yeah, the only thing I did was just like turn it down. So you'll notice that its fader is pretty low here compared to everything else, just because it's super loud, this library. So know when to turn it down. So finally, on the mix bus, on the stereo out, we have Ozone 8. And I'm doing a couple of things that are a little bit extreme and also a little bit conventional. I'd say the most extreme thing is I'm lifting this band quite a bit. And usually when you find yourself having to do these kind of big, broad moves, see node number 8 here, at about 4K we go up. That's when you're like, we got to go back into mixing. But I just wanted to make a very quick stereo master, and I decided that I wanted to do some of the heavy lifting on the, I didn't want to go back instrument to instrument and bring everything up. So I noticed that I just had some high end lacking. So I went right here to the 8th node here and just boosted it quite a bit. A little bit of a dip here at 1. I just wanted to scoop a little bit of low end out of the entire mix here. And so that's why I did that. But I just noticed that like we reached the end of this track and we didn't have a whole lot of high end information going on. So I just decided to make that executive decision. And I don't think I don't think I suffered too much. The track suffered that much as a result of that decision. Next up we have dynamics, and this is just some multi-band compression that is being used. 3 bands here sliced into 81 hertz and below, and then from 81 hertz to 5.8K or so, and then everything upward from that. And these guys all have the same, more or less the same parameters here as we switch between them. And this just helps to kind of frame the mix. And then we have some dynamic EQ, just kind of making sure that before we go into the maximizer to lift the overall level up, we're not distorting. So it identified these areas as being maybe contributing to some harshness before we hit the limiter. And if we didn't take care of these, we could distort as we go into the limiter, which is the maximizer here. So it's being brought down quite a bit. Let me bypass Ozone. I'll use gain match, so you can only hear the processing from the dynamic EQ, the dynamics, and the equalizer. Let's go to the kind of the centerpiece here of the track, and you can hear what difference Ozone is having on the overall kind of sound here. So again, we'll do some more before and afters on the fly. So it does make quite a difference if I do say so myself, especially this move here to bring up the highs. And what I was doing with this gain match is I was making sure that the input matched the level of the output so that we didn't get fooled into thinking that the after sounds much better just because it's louder. So this gain match feature here just helps to keep things really objective when you're kind of bypassing, going in and out. So one of the ways, by the way, that I knew that I had to bring up more high-end information is by using tonal balance control. If you don't know what this plugin does, you basically stick it on your master stereo out, and it kind of takes a look at the overall information from low to high, just basically the balance of energy happening in the low, mid, and high kind of quadrants here. And from there, you can make a determination about what needs to go up, what needs to go down, because these white little lines are going to dance around these 4 sections and tell you where you stack up against a bunch of targets. So we made a few of them here. Bass heavy, this is more for like EDM and stuff like that. Hip hop, modern, which is like top 40, and then orchestral, which is really good for composers. A lot of information here in the low mids, not too much in the high. High, mid, and low are pretty generously kind of boundaried out, so to speak. So when I was mixing this, I noticed that when I brought tonal balance control here at the end, I was lacking a lot. It was showing that I didn't have a lot of information in the high end. So that's why I made this boost. So I'll show you what I mean. So when I bring this all the way down, I'll let it play at the chorus and watch the white lines dance around. And let's see if you can see what I kind of saw when I did this. So you probably figured it out. There's not a lot going on here in the high end. So that's why I decided to bring in Ozone. By the way, because I have Ozone here, there's this thing in Isotope that we have called inter-plugin communication. Basically, it means that our plugins can talk to each other and see each other through this protocol that allows them to communicate. So because I have Ozone here, let's just call it Ozone, Manchester music, like that. I can close it now, and I can actually talk to it from Tonal Balance. So I'll go down here. There it is, Manchester Music, and let's make that boost. So now I'm actually remote controlling the EQ on Ozone. So you notice that when I brought up the node number 8 here, and by the way, if I go back to Ozone, you'll see that go back to the EQ. So so I just remote controlled that, right, from tonal balance control. So now that line on the high end, if I close this, it's, they're kind of relaxing now and going back to the default states because there's no audio passing through, but it went all the way up into the kind of middle territory, which is not necessarily a sweet spot. You just want to make sure if you're going to go by tonal balance control that these lines are at least within the boundaries, but it went up significantly, and to me it sounded a lot better. So have a listen. So yeah, that's kind of it. It's you know what, guys? It's like a combination of using your ears and also relying on some of the metering tools that you have. Tonal balance control is really good. Obviously what your meters are doing in the EQs and stuff, but like we don't have the hearing of bats, right? So we need to rely on some visual tools to help us confirm what we're hearing, or maybe enlighten us about what we're hearing, and maybe we actually have resonance or something going on that we need to have addressed and stuff like that. So a combination of those two things guide me as I mix and mature as a mixing engineer to make decisions about what I'm hearing and what I want to do and what I want the track to sound like. So that kind of concludes this video. If you have any questions or comments, you know where to leave them. If you want more of these kind of mixing little videos or whatever, please let me know. I make a lot of music and I mix a lot of it. I don't always show it on the channel because these videos are kind of long and people like the kind of quick snappy stuff, but hey, if you guys want more of this stuff, I'll do more of this stuff. And yeah, any questions you have about what you saw or heard, please let me know.